The night the storm swept across the old highway, everything seemed to stand still, as if the world was holding its breath. A single dad named Horace was driving home from his late shift, the wipers fighting against heavy rain when his headlights caught something that made his heart jolt. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, maybe a fallen branch or a stray bag, but the faint outline of a wheelchair stopped him cold. He pressed the brakes hard, the tires skidding against the wet road, and the world blurred for a second. When it cleared, he saw her, a young girl, soaked, trembling, and clearly paralyzed from the waist down, sitting alone on the side of the deserted road at nearly midnight. In that instant, before he even opened his door, he knew something was terribly wrong, and he also knew that whatever he said or did next might change not just the night, but someone's entire future. If you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like these remind us that hope often begins with a single act of compassion. Harris stepped out into the storm, ignoring the howling wind slapping against his jacket. His own life had been a series of battles, raising his little son alone after losing his wife, working 2 jobs just to keep their small rented home, and fighting exhaustion day after day. But he had never seen anything like this. The girl looked barely 14, her clothes drenched, her arms visibly strained from trying to push herself to safety. Her hair stuck to her face, and fear clung to her like the cold rain. Harris felt something shift inside him, a mix of protectiveness and sorrow. He bent down, lowered his head to her level, and gently assured her she was safe now. At that moment, the storm didn't matter, nor did the late hour or his aching body. What mattered was that a child who couldn't walk had been left alone in the middle of nowhere. He lifted the wheelchair gently and helped her into his car, covering her with his spare jacket. The warmth of the vehicle made her shiver more as her tense body released its fear. She tried to speak, but her voice broke into soft, terrified breaths. Harris didn't push her with questions. He knew what fear looked like. He turned the heater on and pulled back onto the road, driving slowly as she gathered her strength. When she finally managed to speak, it came out fractured, painful. She explained that her name was Sarah and that she had been waiting for someone who never came. Her relative, an uncle, had promised to pick her up from the rehab center, but after hours of waiting she realized he wasn't coming. When the center closed for the night, a miscommunication left her forgotten outside. She had tried calling him, but he told her he was too busy and would see about it later. Then the storm rolled in, and she had no choice but to stay put, hoping someone would help. Harris felt anger rise inside him. How could anyone abandon a child like this? A child who already had the weight of paralysis on her shoulders, already battling a world that moved too fast and too carelessly around her. He glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror and saw a girl who had learned to expect disappointment. He recognized that look. He had seen it in himself after losing his wife. Life had taught them both that not everyone would show up when they were needed most, and that loneliness, that silent kind, was sometimes worse than any physical pain. When Harris reached his small home, he carried her wheelchair inside first, then gently helped her through the door. His little son, Ali, woke up at the sound of voices and peeked around the corner. When he saw Sarah, he didn't hesitate. He brought her a blanket, offering it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sarah's eyes softened for the first time that night. There was something pure about how children reacted. They didn't judge, didn't question, they just cared. As Harris brewed tea and warmed food, he watched Sarah try to hide her embarrassment. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. But Harris told her she was safe, and that she'd stay with them until they figured out what to do next. The following day, after giving Sarah the rest she desperately needed, Harris began asking her more about her life, and what she told him shook him deeply. Sarah had been paralyzed for almost a year after a tragic car accident that claimed both her parents. Since then, she had been shuttled between relatives, none of whom truly wanted the responsibility. To them, she was a task, someone who required extra work, extra time, extra patience. Her uncle had taken her in only because social workers insisted, but he treated her like an inconvenience. The rehab center was her only place of solace, where she met nurses who encouraged her, therapists who believed she could regain some independence, even if she never walked again. But at home, she was often left alone. No one asked how she felt. No one cared about her fears, and when her uncle didn't show up the night before, a small part of her believed he never would. Listening to her, Harris felt something break inside him. He understood the weight of suffering, the ache of being overlooked, the fear of not being enough. He had lived through nights of holding his son while crying quietly so the boy wouldn't hear. He had fought battles alone, carried responsibilities that no one else saw, and endured criticism for not being strong enough or stable enough after his wife's death. But even in his darkest times, he had never abandoned his son. Hearing that someone could abandon this child, this gentle, wounded soul, filled him with a determination he hadn't felt in years. Days passed, and Sarah began settling into their home. She grew close to little Ali, who constantly made her laugh with his innocent questions. Harris would come home from work to find them coloring together, watching cartoons, or talking about their dreams. Sarah told them she wanted to become a teacher one day, to help kids who felt invisible. She missed her parents terribly, but being with Harris and Ali made her heart feel a warmth she hadn't experienced since the accident. Harris, too, found himself healing through her presence. The house no longer felt heavy with grief. It felt alive again, filled with laughter and hope. But he knew this peace couldn't last without addressing the reality. He would have to confront Sarah's uncle, social workers, and possibly authorities. He didn't want Sarah to suffer more disappointment, but he also knew he couldn't hide her from the world. The world had already taken too much from her. One evening, after tucking Ali into bed, he sat with Sarah and told her a truth she didn't expect. She deserved better. She deserved a family that cared, a home where she was valued, a life where she wasn't just tolerated but loved. And then he said the words that changed everything. He told her that if she was willing, if she wanted it, she could stay with them permanently, not as a guest or a temporary responsibility, but as a daughter, as part of their family. Those words shattered her defenses like fragile glass. No one had ever said anything like that to her since her parents died. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She was terrified of wanting it too much, terrified it might be taken away. But Harris held her trembling hands and promised her that his offer wasn't pity. It was love, real, unconditional love, the kind that builds families out of broken pieces. Viewers, if this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it forward. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories like this into the world. As the adoption process began, challenges emerged. Social workers questioned Harris's financial stability. There were home inspections, interviews, and endless paperwork. Sarah's uncle initially objected, not because he wanted her, but because he didn't want to look bad. The process dragged on for weeks, and there were moments when Harris felt overwhelmed, moments when Sarah cried herself to sleep believing she might be taken away. But Harris never wavered. He fought every step, attending meetings during his lunch breaks, doing overtime shifts to save money, proving again and again that he was capable of giving her a loving home. Then, one morning, the call finally came. The adoption was approved. Sarah was officially his daughter. In that moment, the weight of the world lifted from both of their hearts. Ali hugged her with pure joy, declaring that he finally had a big sister. Harris closed his eyes, silently thanking life for giving him another chance at family, at meaning, at love. And Sarah, sweet, resilient Sarah, felt something she thought she had lost forever, the feeling of belonging. Before the story ends, please comment below, what would you have done if you were in Harris's place? Your words matter. With time, Sarah blossomed. Therapy continued, and she grew stronger both physically and emotionally. Harris saved money for a special wheelchair that allowed her more independence. She started attending a school that welcomed her warmly, and her dream of teaching no longer felt distant. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. And every night when Harris tucked both children into bed, he thanked the stormy night that brought her into their lives. Because sometimes, the greatest miracles come disguised as moments of crisis. Sometimes broken roads lead to beautiful destinations. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is a stranger who refuses to look away. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating stories of hope, humanity, and second chances. Would you like another story with this same emotional cinematic style?